evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, and good evening once again. Hello, my name is Pebbles, founder of Missing, Lost, and Trafficked, lead investigative reporter for Missing, Lost, and Trafficked, and executive administrator for the Missing, Lost, and Trafficked Facebook group. I thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to tune in to this very special broadcast on this evening. This evening, I will be discussing 5 states identified by Google as being problematic in the area of sexual exploitation and more specifically, sex trafficking. Before I discuss the 5 states Google has identified as being problematic for human trafficking, more specifically sex trafficking, I think it's very important that you know, in case you don't know already, how sex trafficking is defined. Okay? Sex trafficking is the action or practice of illegally transporting of people from one country or area for the purposes of sexual exploitation. Sex traffickers lure and ensnare people into forced labor and sex by manipulating and exploiting their vulnerabilities. Okay? Traffickers prey on people who are hoping for a better life. Traffickers prey on individuals who are underemployed or lack employment altogether. Traffickers prey on individuals who are under the age of 18 and have run away or escaped from home. Traffickers target individuals who are um, victims of sexual abuse or sexual molestation. Traffickers also frequently target individuals who have experienced long term physical abuse by one or both parents or an individual considered to be a family member. Sex trafficking has been problematic around the United States and around the world, really, globally, for many decades. In the United States, trafficking became more problematic for young people of all ages and demographics and genders as far back as 2017. The National Human Trafficking Hotline statistics revealed or showed in their research that there was a 25% jump in human trafficking cases from 2017 to 2018, the UNICEF USA reported. Other sex trafficking researchers and organizations they noted that there was a significant spike in trafficking cases across the U.S. in 2017. Trafficking of all forms rather, has become problematic in this country. It's become extremely problematic for families, for individuals, and for our society at large. Trafficking has ripped into the moral conscience of our society. And sex trafficking must be talked about more. Sex trafficking must become a key topic in our conversations. It's important that sex trafficking is placed at the top of our lawmakers' agendas. The legislators, state representatives responsible for turning a bill into a law, responsible for making significant policy changes in this country. Sex trafficking must be resisted instead of being encouraged. Sex trafficking should be battled against instead of being embraced. I wanted to know what states or territories were more prolific than others, more problematic than others for sex trafficking. So I did a simple Google search, right? I just typed in the phrase top 5, sex trafficking states. That's what I typed in. I just went to Google, I went to the search query and typed, top 5 sex trafficking states. And I will list the states that did come up in that search. So at the time that search was conducted, there were 5 out of 10 states listed on Google. The first is Florida. The second state I saw on the list is the state of Georgia. The third state on that list is the state of Nevada. The fourth, it is rather a territory, not officially a state. I know it's confusing. The fourth territory, or area rather, right, is the District of Columbia. And the fifth state is New York. And I found that quite interesting. I really wanted to know. I wanted to know why these states were listed at the top of Google's compiled list of top 10, right? Sex trafficking states. Like, why is that? So I decided to do a bit of research. And I'm going to discuss what I found. I wanted to know, well, why? Why are these states the top 5 states, right? What has been occurring within those states contributing to those states being listed as the top 5 states on Google and on other sites. So I did some research regarding the state of Florida. I wanted to know, well, what is it about Florida? Why did Florida come in first? I really wanted to know that. So I did a bit of reading on bridgingfreedom.org. That's bridgingfreedom.org. And what I found interesting is that uh, Bridging Freedom attributes the tourism industry in Florida as being a contributing factor to human trafficking, to sex trafficking with across the state of Florida. So bridgingfreedom.org said, based upon their research, that the Florida tourism industry and adult entertainment industry, and also the international seaports provide access to traffickers. And I found that to be it's really interesting. I wanted to know what group of individuals are mostly targeted by sex traffickers in the state of Florida. And I did learn that, between 30,000 to 40,000 teens run away from home each year in Florida. I'll say that again. Bridgingfreedom.org notes that between 30,000 and 40,000 teens run away from home each year in Florida. They're either running away or they're being forced out of their homes. I learned that there is a lot of family dysfunction across the state of Florida, a lot of dysfunctional households, dysfunctional family units in the state of Florida, a lot of children being cared for by parents who should be in therapy or seeking psychological help for their mental disorders or mental conditions. So teens are being forced out of their homes in Florida, and I learned that a lot of these teens are feeling as though it's better for them to be on the street, trusting a random stranger than to be in the company of, or not in the company. I guess it may, to them, it may just feel like they're just in the company and not the care of, but in the care of their own mom, in the care of their own father, in the care of their own uncle, in the care of their own grandparents. I found that to be disturbing, that when you get down to the root of the problem, one cause, I would say, one contributing factor to the problem of sex trafficking in Florida, well, it goes back to family dysfunction. And I found that to be interesting and disturbing. Okay. One out of three runaway teens in Florida will be lured by a sex trafficker within 48 hours of being on their own, according to the National Incidence Studies of Missing, Abducted, Runaway, and Throwaway Children. In case that went over your head, I'll say it again. And I'm discussing the problem of trafficking in Florida and the root cause being mostly attributed to runaway youth. One out of three runaway teens will be lured by sex traffickers within 48 hours of being on her own, according to the National Incident Studies of Missing and Runaway and Throwaway Children. That's rather disheartening, isn't it? It's rather disturbing, isn't it? So now that you know that the tourism industry, the adult entertainment industry, international seaports are providing access to traffickers in the state of Florida. And now that you know that the root cause of the problem of sex trafficking in Florida can be attributed mostly, right? Not in whole, but mostly, right? To the problem of 30 to 40,000 teens running away from home each year in the state of Florida, placing themselves in vulnerable situations, vulnerable conditions, setting themselves up to be manipulated and taken advantage of. Now I want to move on to Georgia, the state of Georgia, ladies and gentlemen. Second on Google's list, they compiled of 5 states. Most problematic for human trafficking in our country. Georgia came in second, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to understand why trafficking is so problematic in the state of Georgia. Why is trafficking so problematic in the state of Georgia? Media organizations have consistently noted Georgia's traffickers prey on vulnerable teens who run away from home. Trafficking in Georgia has increased significantly due to the increased financial gain for human traffickers. The FBI estimates that underground sex trafficking, or the underground sex trafficking industry in Georgia, accumulates about $290 million a year. The FBI estimates that the underground sex trafficking industry makes about $290 million a year. So in Georgia, trafficking youth, if traffickers are successful, traffickers can become extremely wealthy. They can live the good life in the state of Georgia. They can become extremely wealthy trafficking children in the state of Georgia. And it's also important that you know that Atlanta, Georgia, has the world's busiest airport, which is called the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, which makes it easier for traffickers to import and export victims. Now, I don't know if you all, I don't know who's familiar with Atlanta and the Hartsfield Airport in Atlanta, but I'm going to tell you that airport is huge. That airport is like it's a city within itself. If it doesn't have its own zip code already, that airport should have its own zip code. The Hartsfield, I've been in the Atlanta airport, the Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta Airport, that is, numerous times, flying in and flying out. And I can tell you a lot of things can go unnoticed at that airport. So researchers are learning that one of the largest airports in the city of Atlanta is really, it has become an unnoticed hub, right, for traffickers, for human traffickers. So I did find that to be rather interesting. Georgia seems to have the same issues that Florida is having. There are a lot of youth in Georgia running away from home, a lot of youth being manipulated into situations they shouldn't be in. They're being promised things. They're being promised uh, a nice, comfortable bed in a nice hotel. They're being bought things, whether it be clothes or whether it be jewelry or hair or whatever it is. The traffickers are figuring out that if they could just meet just kind of basic needs of these teens and maybe throw in some material stuff that they would want while they're out there on the streets, then they can get them within their grasp, and then they can have them in a situation where they're chained to a bed from 5 to 7 years, being sexually exploited in unimaginable ways by people either all over that city, outside of that state, and some traffickers may smuggle their victims into another country entirely. It is really a horrific situation, ladies and gentlemen. Coming in third on Google's top 5 list is Nevada. AwakenReno.org states that Nevada has a reputation of being a safe haven for pimps, traffickers, buyers, and legalized prostitution. I don't know if you know this, but 40 years ago, prostitution was legalized in the state of Nevada. So prostitution has been legalized for a very long time in the state of Nevada. Nevada has enabled their sex traffickers to run rampant through this state, exploiting vulnerable people. So prostitution has been widely accepted, embraced, and it was decriminalized more than 40 years ago in Nevada. So being that, sex, the prostitution industry, the sex industry, adult entertainment industry has been decriminalized for such a long period of time, it is easier for traffickers to go under the radar, go unnoticed, and to traffic, lure, coerce, and abduct vulnerable children all across the state of Nevada. Traffickers, they know that the chances of them being, captured. When I say captured, that means, taken to jail, prosecuted, convicted, right? It's a little slimmer in the state of Nevada because, prostitution itself and sex slavery, and that's what it is, it's more widely accepted in the state of Nevada. Prostitution, sex slavery, it's more widely accepted. So politicians are more inclined to turn a blind eye to that sort of thing in the state of Nevada. So I hope that you understand, why, Nevada has become quite problematic for trafficking. Now I want to talk about the territory that came in fourth on Google's list of top sex trafficking states. And now I want to talk about the District of Columbia. Here's one thing you need to know about DC itself. There is a wide income gap in DC. I've been to DC. I've visited DC. I remember several years ago, I was like in my early 20s. I went to DC to speak with and to meet with Congressman Cohen, Steve Cohen. And I remember getting off of a Greyhound bus, and I remember seeing people living out of cardboard boxes on the property of the DC Greyhound, right? On the Greyhound's property, like right on their front lawn. I was seeing folks living out of cardboard boxes in DC. I saw people driving, custom made cars, wearing very expensive, apparel or, attire. But then in DC, I also saw folks living out of cardboard boxes right on the front lawn of the Greyhound, downtown DC. And I'll never forget what I saw because it troubled me. There is a huge income gap in DC. A huge income gap. And due to the harsh economic disparities in DC, right, in that city, many victims are being lured into trafficking situations to provide necessities for their families. The Congressional Black Caucus Foundation has reported. The Council Office of Racial Equity research on Black and white income in DC concluded that the median income for white residents at $149,734 a year was, 3 times higher than the median income of Black residents, which is only a little bit over $49,000 a year. And I found that to be extremely problematic. So there's this huge wealth gap in DC between the rich and the poor, right? You either got it, or you don't really have it at all. Okay. And so a lot of the, you know, people, especially young females and males are being trafficked too. So I want you to know that females aren't the only, it's not the only gender being trafficked. There are males being trafficked too. So due to this huge wealth disparity in DC, there are folks doing what's called survival sex. They are having sex forcefully, or maybe they may have initially, right, whether it be a young underage person or someone over the age of 18, possibly initially agreed to, prostitute themselves, and then, uh, you know, they decide that they want to get out or not continue on that path, and they find themselves in a situation where they're literally trapped and they can't just break away. They can't just change their mind. And I find that to be, I find that to be very disheartening. Now I want to talk about New York. New York came in fifth on Google's top list. I want to talk about New York. Gotham Gazette reported that there are, gaps in the New York state sex trafficking laws, limiting prosecutors' ability to convict traffickers on high level felonies, making sex trafficking of children in New York, uh, you know, making the conviction rate uh, nearly very low, I would say, for individuals who are actually sex trafficking children in the state of New York. In New York State, sex trafficking convictions require proof of force, fraud, or coercion, even if the victim is under 18. So prosecutors must prove in the state of New York, they must prove that sex trafficking victims were forced against their will to have sex so that traffickers can, you know, earn a profit. That's a problem due to the emotional and mental abuse and the fear instilled into many sex trafficking victims, whether they be, of age or underage. It's very difficult for prosecutors to, convince sex trafficking victims to testify. And that's what it would really require for a successful conviction, to testify against their traffickers, individuals who have trafficked them. So yeah, the trafficking laws, they are set up in a way whereas traffickers, chances of conviction is lower in the state of New York, um, as compared to other states. And that is extremely important for you to know. That is extremely important for you to know. So I just wanted to discuss why human trafficking or sex trafficking specifically, there are different forms of trafficking, has become more problematic in states. And the states that I discussed tonight is Florida, Georgia, Nevada, DC, right, in New York, more so than other states in this country. I'm hoping that you will become more aware, right? More conscious of the problems that sex trafficking has brought about in your states. I'm hoping that by discussing the issues with sex trafficking in the states that I've discussed tonight, that it will prompt you to, pay a little bit more attention. Notice what your children are doing and take a little bit more notice, of what they're doing. Go ahead and snoop around if you need to snoop around, because I wouldn't want anyone to become a victim of sex trafficking. The survival rate of the average person being trafficked is no more than 7 years. Like their life survival rate is no more than 7 years. That's about all that the human body can take, about 7 years. And for some, it's a lot less than that. I thank you all so very much for taking the time right now to watch this live stream this evening. I thank you so very much. I notice when I'm actually talking about trafficking, I don't tend to get a lot of views, and there's not a lot of engagement. Folks aren't that interested when I'm just talking about trafficking if it's not attached to a person that they know. If it's not me saying, hey, Susan thinks her daughter is trafficking. Nobody's really checking for that, But the name of my media organization that I founded is Missing, Lost, and Trafficked. So, how can I just talk about missing people all the time, lost folks, lost dogs, lost whatever all the time, and just not, provide you with some, education, right, into what trafficking is and discuss the problem of trafficking. So I think that this is important. Hopefully in the future, more people will become a lot more interested in actually learning more about trafficking. I know that trafficking is the first, word a lot of folks mention whenever a female goes missing. They say they've been trafficked. They've been trafficked. They've been trafficked. They've been trafficked. But I don't think that we have, I would say, and I want to put this in the right way. I don't feel that our public is well informed, and I'm still learning. I'm learning every day about trafficking and how trafficking works. I don't feel that we're well educated on what trafficking is and how trafficking works, right? How traffickers actually lure people. And we don't have knowledge of the signs of actual trafficking victims. We're walking past trafficking victims, riding past trafficking victims every day. We're in the grocery store shopping. I've been in the laundromat unknowingly with trafficking victims that were in a situation where they were being, forced to be with someone, and I didn't realize it. And so since I have, you know, gone out of my way to learn more about trafficking and how trafficking works and who could be a trafficking victim, how do I identify a trafficking victim, right? It's helped me a lot moving forward. So I could kind of decipher the difference between a missing person who could be potentially being trafficked and a missing person that's, you know, voluntarily been missing, or a missing person who ran away from home and laying up with a boyfriend somewhere, or her older cousins, where, I can kind of decipher a little bit. I don't automatically go to the trafficking on every case because I know that's just not the case. Every black girl is not being trafficked. Every white girl is not being trafficked. Every Hispanic female is not being trafficked. Every Asian female is not being trafficked. Every Indian female that goes missing in this country is not being trafficked. However, trafficking is a problem. And California, Miss LaRonda Lachelle is definitely on that list. So I'm going to continue to raise awareness about trafficking. And I hope in the future, the 4 views that I'm getting, I see the number 4 on my screen, may increase to 400. I'm hoping more people will become interested in just understanding what trafficking is, right? That's what I'm hoping will happen. So we're just not throwing that word around without being knowledgeable of what trafficking is, how it works, what states are more prolific than others in trafficking activities. That's important. So parents, if you're raising children and they're going to end up entering junior high or high school, and you live in the state of Florida, you need to become very knowledgeable of what trafficking is and the tactics that traffickers use to lure your children away from you for 7 years or possibly permanently. If you live in the state of Georgia and you are a parent, you need to be very, 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 very Georgia parents, especially Georgia parents. I reported on a girl that was abducted and lured and forced into doing some things. She was gone for more than 40 days. And I just did not give up on her. I would not give up on her. I can't even imagine how she has been mentally impacted by the experience that she encountered. And she was lured away in the state of Georgia. Georgia parents, let's become more knowledgeable about the tactics that traffickers are using in Georgia. Let's become aware about, just what's happening, right, with trafficking laws and policies in Georgia. If you are a parent in the state of Nevada, you're raising children, they'll be going to junior high and then high school soon. They have iPhones and other types of devices at their disposal. You need to know that these traffickers are luring your children away through video games. You need to know that. Through Instagram and Facebook. You need to know that traffickers are preying on your child's loneliness. You need to understand that your child gets lonely. My mom was able to, keep me from making a lot of foolish mistakes because she was in tune with me at an early age. My mom understood that I suffered from depression and loneliness at a very early age. So she was figuring out ways to combat that. So the devil doesn't come in and exploit those feelings. Understand your children get lonely. Accept it, embrace it, figure out some things that you can do with your children, some outings you can do with your children, some ways to make your children a little bit more social, you know, with, other peers, not just any peers, right? And they can do productive things rather than giving their ear and their time and their mind to a pimp up the street. If you are a parent and you are residing in DC, in the District of Columbia, in DC, you should definitely be very watchful and very knowledgeable of what's going on in DC. You should be paying, you should always pay attention to your children, but I'm saying pay extra close attention to them. If you are a parent and you reside in New York, you should always pay attention to your children, but I'm asking you to pay a little bit extra attention to your children. Because you know what? When you're not paying attention, that's when those traffickers are and they're watching. And they are on standby, ready to exploit your children. And if you are feeling vulnerable, possibly you. Thank you so very much for taking time out to watch this live stream today. I thank you so very much for all of your support. And I hope that if you're watching, whether you're watching on YouTube or watching on Facebook, that you would share this live stream with all of your family members and all of your friends. I want you all to have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.